Hello and welcome back to the Ghoul Guide Association, the show where we talk about all things gothic and pop culture. We are, as ever, your Ghoul Guides. I'm Lauren.
And I'm Mary.
And today we have a review episode,
Yes.
which you are familiar with from Mary, but it's not horror films today. We're doing a slightly different review from you.
Yes, yeah. Well, you and I have done a couple of book review episodes, and then I think we found that actually it's probably better to just review one book at a time. So if anyone hasn't checked out our previous book episodes, we've done some witchy recommends, done some culty recommends. We also have your wonderful review of Butter.
Yes, and Catabasis.
And Catabasis, yeah. And so I read, maybe we'll just say what I'll be reviewing today, and then I'll give the history of it. Today we'll be reviewing Strange Buildings, the latest offering from Uketsu, a Japanese murder thriller horror author. I love this book, and this is part of this. Well, this is the third installment. Here I have all of them. So we have the first book, Strange Pictures, and then the second book, Strange Houses. Although technically, I think the ordering of the first two is can be changed around a little bit. It's not that important, but essentially, last October, I was in Nottingham, and I think you and I went into, or maybe it wasn't October, but it was definitely last year. You and I went into Waterstones, and we both picked up a book, and I saw the first book by Uketsu, and I was like, this cover looks amazing. And for those of you who are listening to this podcast, we'll put some pictures up on on our Instagram, so go over there.
Yeah, if you're not following our Instagram, I've started a highlights reel, so like our stories, where I've posted like the books that we've recommended previously on the podcast. So one, go and follow us, because intermittently that's where we will be recommending the gothic-y books that we've read. There's a couple already on there, and also you'll be able to, I will do a story for each of these, and then you'll be able to see the amazing covers, because that was really what drew us to it, because we were at the buy one get one half price table.
I love books. I mean, I love books that have gorgeous covers, and I
love that you just said I love books. Yeah, there we going. PhD in English literature.
The reason that I started reading Sid More's Essex Witch Book Museum book series is because it had a gorgeous skull on the front, and I was like, I need that book in my life. And it's the same with this. These covers are gorgeous, and they're also tactile, and I love that. And you'll see, so this latest book, you can see there is a knife with blood and blood on this house as well. So it's just, they're nice to feel, which is, I mean,
they've got like that nice embossed.
Yes, it's not the most important thing about a book, obviously, but it is something that, for me, definitely, it will draw me in. And these are by Pushkin Press at Vertigo. So yeah, kudos to them, and like, thank you so much, because like, I love these books. You may have heard of Uketsu and his Strange series, but if not, he is essentially a cult kind of, like I said, Japanese YouTuber and author of mystery and horror fiction. His identity is unknown. And again, I think for me, I really love this. I just love that there is like this extra layer of mystery and mystique to this author. And so before publishing his books, which were originally published in Japanese and they have been translated into loads of different languages now, he was a YouTuber, and he would post these really kind of strange, unusual, unsettling short videos where he would kind of unsettle or weird like everyday objects and scenes. and he would appear in them with a white papier mache mask, and then a kind of black bodysuit, which is already quite weird. And then his voice, he uses a voice changer to distort it. So there is nothing kind of identifying about him. And I'm using male pronouns because I think that's what he has used. But again, we don't actually know anything about Uketsu, and they could be anyone. And again, I think that adds to this kind of mystique.
Yeah, definitely.
And like his YouTube videos, his books also incorporate an element of the visual. So they incorporate like diagrams and images that you can use to solve, like, they're clues. And as you're reading it, you can have a look at these pictures as well and maybe see if you can solve or uncover the mystery. So for me, as someone who does quite like detective fiction, murder fiction, but especially where it does have that kind of horror element as well, it's great. I love that, like being able to be a part of that mystery and try and solve it. And I've read quite a lot of Japanese fiction, especially recently, but just in general. And I know a lot of Japanese fiction often does start with, there will be, if there's a murder in the house, they'll have a floor plan. And I think that's partly what Uketsu is doing. It's not just with floor plans, but he does include a lot of floor plans in these stories. And as the kind of narrative is taking you through different rooms or different entrances or perhaps hidden doors, he will have that, which again, I find that so helpful for me. I find it difficult to visualize. You can talk about a layout of a house, and I will find that difficult to visualize. So not only is it kind of something that functions as a clue that you as the reader can get involved with, but it's also helps me to visualize and has it's helpful.
Well, it kind of it like enhances the reading experience, but it's also like buying into the is parasocial the right word, like the metatextuality of mystery fiction, that part of the reason that we love mystery fiction is because we want to try and solve the mystery. And like you've got those like mystery games that are so popular now where like you get sent a case file and it's a game and you try and solve the case file, or like escape rooms and stuff. Like it's allowing the novel format to take on that additional interactive metatextual aspect that is so satisfying about reading mystery fiction. Like that is one of the reasons that we read it, is because we want to try and solve the mystery. And I think having that additional visual is so helpful. Like I love when books kind of invite that slightly more, like, I know why you're reading this, so let me give you what you need to be able to solve this mystery.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I think that kind of engagement where you as the reader are invited in to this story in that kind of problem solving, mystery solving kind of way is such a big draw. So if you like that, then these are definitely for you. The other thing as well is that they often have lots of different storylines that might seem quite disparate, but they actually all end up being interconnected. And the way that he connects them up is really interesting. And a lot of them are often lend themselves to like dark and creepy and macabre themes. So there's like one of his books, there's this drawing, or there's a couple of drawings actually, that the drawings themselves are unsettling. And then one of them, you uncover that there's something dark about the person that's drawn them, and the things that his narrator can pick out and find out. The drawings are creepy, and then what's revealed is creepy, and it's like, okay, so this isn't just your normal, like, this isn't necessarily a murder mystery where there's a murder, a detective comes in, and then we're in it where it's more of like it's more layered in a way, and it sometimes you're trying to work out what the mystery actually is, and there is often murder involved, but there's also other elements that I find just so fascinating. And what I will say as well is that these are, I'm not going to say they're an easy read, but they're a very quick read. I read them, I think, in a day or a couple of days each, because part of it is because you're like, I'm so interested. I need to get to the end.
I need to know.
There's obviously lots of drawings, lots of diagrams, lots of images in them as well. But the narration itself is quite conversational. So in two of them, at least, there is the narrator who has found these strange building plans or images, and he takes them to his architect friend, and then we'll get a kind of dialogue between the two where they're trying that, they're giving their theories. So I really like that, and I think if you're into like podcasts, or if you're into like true crime or online like kind of conversations and discussion boards where there's that back and forth and you're testing out different theories, I think you'll really enjoy that, and it has that really lovely,
that's like
conversational style.
Yeah, that's my favorite sort of like TV like serial, like mystery serials, are things like Elementary or like the early seasons of Castle, where you've got like, there's the detective, there's the assistant, there's the coroner, there's the like, I really enjoy those sort of like procedural type shows where you've got the different people with different sets of knowledge, and together they illuminate it, rather than like, I'm not so much of a fan of like the grizzled solo cop trying to uncover the mystery. Like, I much more prefer the sort of like interactiveness, because you feel like part of it. And I think that is a really appealing way of doing mystery, and not something you get so much in like novel format, because, and I think, Japanese fiction is really good at doing this. Like, I was just thinking, it sounds like something like What You're Looking For Is Inside the Library, as a mystery novel, where it's like a series of interconnected stories that don't necessarily seem to work together but actually do, and there's not necessarily like a clear narration, but then you get there at the end. Like, it is a very readable type of fiction, I think we've both been quite enjoying recently.
And I think especially because there are these two main characters that do have this back and forth, and you also get his other conversations with other people trying to work out different different things, or different buildings where he speaks to people, but that you have these two main characters who offer their theories, and there is something that you as the reader can kind of decide. Do you believe one or the other? Do you have your own theory? So it is definitely something that I think it's taken that mystery element and it's translated it into a novel, I think, in a really creative way, that also then hinges on these really unsettling kind of images, partly because some of them are just so ordinary, and then once you start looking at them
like
and you're
mundane.
like, exactly, like this is just a house, but then you look at this plot and it's like, oh yeah, there is a corridor that just goes to nowhere, and why is that corridor there? And then you start going through that, and then you uncover something, and it's like, wow, okay. So Strange Buildings, as I said, it's the latest translation and publication, the latest English translation. All of the English translations are done by a man called Jim Rion. So massive shout out to you, because you he's translated. There's so much in them that I think is about that, not just the actual language but the cultural specificity. And I think that these are, you and I both read a lot of translated fiction, and I think sometimes there are things where you're like, I don't think this is quite translated well, but he does such a brilliant job.
Translation, good translation is such an important part of, I can't remember which we definitely talked about this, and I can't remember if it was one of our horror review episodes or one of our book review episodes, but the nuance of translation, like, despite the fact I don't speak Japanese, I don't speak Korean, I've watched, listened, heard enough, and like, I have this quite a lot with Spanish, where I'm like, the translation into English has lost the nuance because that doesn't
Yeah.
exist. There is no way to say that in English. And I do often think, like, when I'm watching stuff that's been translated or listening to stuff that's been translated from Spanish, and I think, oh, that's so much more beautiful and so much more meaningful. Like, a great example is Debí tirar más fotos by Bad Bunny. Like, everyone's been singing that lately
Yeah.
because, I mean, he
Yeah.
barely actually performed that song, but in Spanish, like, I wish I'd taken more photos when I had you with me. I wish I'd, like, hugged you more and kissed you more. Like, I hope my people don't leave me. Like, the context of, like, him as a Puerto Rican, like, that song is so sad and so moving. But then when someone says, like, oh, what's he saying? And you say, oh, he's saying, I wish I took more photos. Like, it doesn't have the same hit necessarily. And I think that does sometimes happen when you're reading translated fiction. And I do think in the last couple of years, the quality of translation, particularly of East Asian literature, has gotten really, really good.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that we are, like, putting the translator on the front cover now, because who the translator is such an important part. And it's really, I think it's really great that this is the same translator, that it's a translator he's working with consistently, because I think that usually shows, like, that they understand the authorial voice and the style really well.
Yeah, he's translated all of them. There is also a fourth one, Strange Maps,
Awesome,
which I think
exciting.
has come out in Japan. And not that I, stalk these people, but I was on a Reddit thread, and I think Jim Rion said that he was currently working on the translation for that book. So I'm very excited about Strange Maps. And yeah, I just had to shout him out because Uketsu, these are so weird and wonderful, and Jim Rion does such a brilliant job of really translating that. And actually, so I was reading an interview with Uketsu, and he does actually talk about this idea about fear and how it mutates across international boundaries, which, while we're on this translation point, I'll just bring this up. So he says, and I'm quoting, "I believe it becomes more essential or universal. For example, in Japan, there's a tradition where households with young daughters display many dolls on March the 3rd. Even today, this is widely practiced. Personally, I find the sight of rows of dolls unsettling. However, from a foreign perspective, the act of lining up numerous dolls on March the 3rd might seem peculiar in itself. Because it's part of one's own culture, people might fail to recognize the intrinsic fear it holds." And I think that is such a really interesting concept about how things in our own culture can be unsettling. But then also when you have that international boundary, because there's a lack of familiarity and a lack of knowledge about it, they might be doubly unsettling. Which I just think, it's really interesting when we're thinking about this as a translated text.
Yeah, that reminds me of, I can't remember if I've recommended this before or not. If I haven't, then go find it. There's a really great film collection called Short Piece, and I think it's 5 short anime films. All, and the kind of key theme is about, like, unsettling and the human experience, and, like, they're not horror. I would say they're more gothic. There is one story about an Oni that is quite bloody, but, like, one of the stories is about a firefighter, and he's in love with this young noblewoman. They can't be together. One of the stories is very futuristic. It's like a mecha story. But they're all sort of, I would say, gothic-y style tales. And my favorite of them is one about a guy who stumbles across a temple that is sort of dedicated to forgotten objects. And in Japan, there's a tradition of, like, if I owned a doll, that doll is mine, and part of my essence would essentially be transferred into that doll. And it's why secondhand culture isn't really a thing historically in Japan, because there's this idea that the things you own have part of you in them, and there's something really beautiful about it. And it's why, like, objects can be really treasured that belong to, like, a loved one or a family member. But what this short film does is basically turn it into, like, a ghost. It's like a haunted house story, but the haunted house is all of these like once loved forgotten objects that can't ever be taken on by someone else. And it's like a sort of like horror version of Toy Story, maybe, where it's like, you know, the owner's moved on. But watching that was that thing of like, they give you this little note at the beginning so you understand the concept, but as an international viewer that doesn't have that cultural knowledge, it takes on an additional level of fear because you don't really understand why these things feel this resentment, and because you've never thought of it before. Like, I had never considered it before, and then it was, I think that's why that film stuck with me so intensely, because I was like, oh god, like that's like, if I believe that concept is so sad, like, and so scary in so many ways. And that is such an interesting, I suppose, for him, knowing now that he's writing for an international audience, and he starts, you know, if he started out by making the mundane uncanny, like that's one of my favorite gothic things, is like, I think I talked about this in some of my reviews, like the everyday gothic, the mundane horror, like,
I think,
and then, to be able to make that cross translation.
And I think what's also really interesting is, so I've said that a lot of his books contain like these images, and they are so important, and he has them in YouTube videos as well. But yeah, like the images, the sketches, and the floor plans are just as important as the actual narrative. And in this same interview, he talks about that, and he says, I was inspired by the existence of drawing tests in psychoanalysis, which involve analyzing the subconscious mind of the person who created the drawing. I found this concept intriguing and thought it would make for an interesting story if combined with elements of mystery and suspense. So first I draw what I consider a scary and eerie picture, and then I create the story by imagining what kind of background would make this picture interesting. So again, like, I think that's a really interesting way of like writing a book, where you start with a picture and then you think about its kind of eerie and unsettling and mysterious potentials. So
I love that. That's great.
I do as well, and I've really enjoyed all three of his books. I'm not going to spoil them, but I'll just give a quick little summary about his latest one, which it's literally, I think it was published last month. So
I was going to say, I'm fairly sure when we came round to review Wuthering Heights, that was the day it arrived.
And I was like, I've got this book, I'm going to read it, and I will review it. So the tagline of this, is it a tagline for a book? We'll call it a tagline.
Yeah, it's a tag. I'm sure it's a tagline. Byline, maybe?
Byline?
No, that's a newspaper. Blurb.
11 strange buildings, 1 terrible secret. So essentially, the way that this book is structured, and thinking about this as a Gothic text, we have 11 stories where the narrator talks us through 11 different buildings. And again, this is where you get these are all random, like, how do they connect? And he said, the narrator, I will get to a bit at the end. And then the final part, so the 12th section, is the narrator going to his architect friend and then talking about, he talks about it as he hands over this packet of these notes that he's compiled about these 11 strange buildings and these strange stories. And then they have a discussion, and then that's where we get the theories. And I think that idea of having this tactile case book is very Gothic, and you can just imagine that.
It's very Lefanu.
It is, yes. And I think also just the stories themselves, they are strange, and they're a lot shorter. And I think in some of the other ones, the narrative it's more easy to see how it's connected, even though there are disparate things. But what I will say about the narrative of this story, what connects these 11 buildings, is that at the center of the story is a cult. And this isn't, there are other cult-like elements in some of his other books, but this is at the heart of this book is a cult called the Rebirth cult, and a figure called the Holy Mother. And I'm not going to say.
Oh,
Yeah.
Is this based on the real cult where they found them in the attic in the ceiling? There was. Oh, this has just sparked a memory. There is a female cult leader, and I'm fairly sure she was Japanese. She may have been Korean. Apologies. It was on a documentary, and they had like East Asian cult leaders. There was a cult in East Asia that was like run by this like holy mother, and they found all these bodies in this ceiling of this warehouse where they'd been hiding out, and it was like a huge like scandal. And I'm wondering if that was like maybe some of the inspiration for this, because
so yeah,
it's sparked.
It's not that, but I think that, I mean, especially when we look at things from a, you know, not a Christian perspective, and talking about that whole kind of like cultural, you know, we come from a very kind of culturally Christian society. Japan is well, there are
kind of like multi-religious.
It's multi-religious. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. There's a lot of Buddhism. There are a lot of Shinto Christians. There's lots of different religious practices and rituals. And this cult is, I guess, drawing on more of that than what we might think of coming from a culturally Christian society. But I think that that idea of sin, rebirth, the importance of women and children in this cult, and I'm not going to say anything more because I really think that it is such an enjoyable book to read, but the cult itself is connected to the buildings in such a really interesting interesting way that it's just, I was reading it, and this one especially, I think you would enjoy the other two, and they're really, like I say, it's not that they're an easy read, but you will just read, tear through the narrative because it's so good. But this one, when I was reading it, I was like, Lauren will really enjoy the cult side of this.
I will. I was wrong. I've just Googled it just to avoid confusion because I've realized I went off a tangent. Apologies, listeners. It was Korean. It was called the Odeang cult incident. It was a female cult leader called Park Sin-ja. They were masquerading as a trading company, and they found 32 bodies in the attic of the dining hall in a factory. So that's where my brain made a weird connection.
But it's but I mean, like I said, like it is still part of that East Asian more, you know, culturally relevant kind of cult growing up, and so, for example, one of the stories is centered around part one. We don't ever get part two, which is the brilliance of Uketsu, but part one of an investigative journalist's report. So it's like printed in this magazine, here's part one, stay tuned for part two. We never see part two, but it's him going undercover in the cult. And so this is quite far into the book, so it's not like the first story that you read, but you know, he talks about and there's you know, what people are wearing, and then going into this specific space that's been made where at the center is the Holy Mother. Then you come out, and then you all go to this other room, and there are beds, and you all, like, all of these like hundreds of cult members just go and they have a sleep, and then you wake up, and it's this kind of idea of rebirth, which I'm not going to go any more into it. That's not really a spoiler, but it is just a little taste of what you can expect from this book.
Awesome. Such a dynamic way of storytelling. I will definitely be reading those. Thank you.
I will lend them to you. They're very enjoyable.
Amazing. Well, Thank you for that review. I think that's definitely something that will appeal to a lot of our fellow Ghoul Guide Association members. And if there's anything like that that you want to recommend to us, obviously please drop us a comment wherever it is you're listening. And as I said, please go and find us on Instagram at the Ghoul Guides, because we do share some reading recs over there, and we are going to be doing that a little bit more going forward. I'd gotten on a good kind of like hustle with it, and then I was really sick last month, which is why we didn't do many episodes, and I didn't read anything because I mostly just slept and cocooned in a blanket and watched TV, which, you know, that's fine. But yes, we will be doing more reading recommendations over on Instagram, so please make sure you go and follow us there, and we will patiently await the translation of Uketsu's next novel.
I already can't wait. I'm so excited for it already. And it probably won't be out for another year, but who knows?
Who knows? Translation sadly does take time for a good one, but worth waiting for.
Absolutely. Yeah. I cannot say it enough.
Yeah.
These books are wonderful. And yeah, I guess one warning, some of the storylines can get quite violent. So not only are there gothic and eerie elements, there are definitely horror elements with murders or other kinds of violence. But
yeah,
the images, it's not like watching a horror movie. If there are ever sketches, they are very rudimentary, which I think just makes them even more interesting.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like if you're like me and you're not much of a horror tolerator visually, then reading is always, I can read horror, whereas I can't necessarily watch it. Although I have had to pause reading The Unworthy because I got about 20 pages in and I was like, oh, this is visceral. So I've gone and read something a bit softer, and then I'm going to go back and read The Unworthy. So watch out for my take on that one on the Instagram. And until next time, we hope you will enjoy your respective reading. Stay safe and stay spooky.
Stay safe and stay spooky.